of tankers, I'm Blitz, and today we'll be talking about my top 5 choices for Tier 10 ratings battles. Now, of course, I had made a Tier 8 video already, so if you do want to check that out, I'll link both of them in the description down below. I did the top 5 premium Tier 8s and then the top 5 tech tree ones for Tier 8 ratings battles. But today, I'm going to be talking about my top 5 tanks in general at Tier 10 for ratings. Now, of course, before I do get into this, I just want to say this is a completely opinionated video. The tanks I'm going to be picking for you guys here, a lot of you might have different opinions. You might like a T22A, somebody else might like an IS4. It's all down to personal preference, but just judging on statistical win rates, how the guns are, how these tanks really play in-game, I'm going to be telling you guys the top 5 choices I have picked for today. So make sure to stay tuned and let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hitting the number 5 spot is the T57 Heavy. Now, this tank does not have spectacular armor, it does not have a spectacular top speed, it only goes 35 kilometers per hour. In fact, the really only good thing about this tank is what makes it so amazing, being the auto-loading gun. Now, this tank has a base damage per minute of 3,049, and when you're talking about autoloaders, that is truly an amazing number, because most autoloaders have terrible damage per minutes because they take a long time to reload that clip, but they're able to burst out a large amount of damage and then get back in the cover, so they trade damage per minute for having the ability to burst people. But the T57 Heavy does not lose any damage per minute, and it still has one of the best clips in the game. 1200 damage with a shell velocity of 1067, and it only takes 5 seconds to unload the entire clip. The shells are dead eye accurate, and I can't just tell you guys how many times I've pulled out in an E100 or an E5 or anything like that in front of a 57 Heavy and just been completely demolished, tracked with the first shot, tracked with the second, tracked with the third, lost 1200 hit points, and pretty much gone straight back to the garage. The 57 is just a tank you do not want to be caught out in the open with. And as long as you're, smart enough to stick with your team, you can just pull out, bruise the enemy. You don't even need to pen all of your shells. If you think about it, if you literally just pen 2 of your shots, that's 2.5 seconds after the first shell. You're pretty much doing the same damage as a 183 with a standard shell. It's just a crazy amount of damage it's able to unload in a crazy amount of time. Not to mention, this tank has the best aiming time out of every Tier 10 Heavy in the game at 1.51 seconds, and the dispersion value at 0.301 makes it the 3rd best out of every Tier 10 Heavy as well. It's got amazing dispersion factors while on the move, when rotating the turret, after shot. They're also top in class, and it comes with 8 degrees of gun depression. As well, 44.67 degrees a second on the traverse speed for the turret makes it the fastest turret traverse speed in the game. And when you combine that with, as I said, the number 1 after shot and on rotation of the turret dispersion values, the gun just never disperses when you're turning to shoot at the enemy, snapping people. That's what makes this tank so crazy. The gun really never disperses whenever you shoot, whenever you're on the move, anything like that. And that's some of the issues I really find with a tank like the AMX 50B, is when you're shooting the first shell, after you fire it, it blooms quite a bit. This tank is always eagle eye zoomed in, it's like a laser beam. So that is why I really do love this tank, and it is, in my opinion, one of the strongest vehicles. If you don't have it, I would definitely suggest to grind down this tank, especially because the T49 is such a joy as it is. Jumping into the number 4 spot is the Chieftain Mark 6, which I call the King of the Hill. And the reason for that being is just because it's so strong in pretty much every single category. When talking about the gun on this tank, in my opinion, as I say in many of my videos, this is the best gun in the entire game. The reason for that being is because it carries 3,167 damage per minute, which is excellent for a top tier heavy. It's got excellent standard penetration at 260, which is the 2nd best out of all the tier 10 heavies in the game. While the premium pen isn't spectacular at 310, they both have insane shell velocities at 1,372, which is going to hit anything across the map with barely even leading your shots. Now, the only disadvantage with having APCR rounds as your standard ammo and premium is that penetration loss over distance is really bad on this tank at 9.62. So if you're ever running this tank and you wonder why your shots don't pen people really far away, it's just because it loses a lot of penetration over distance. But the nice thing about it is that it does have such an accurate gun. At base aiming time of 1.72 and dispersion value of 0.308, it really never misses its shots. Its dispersion factors while on the move when rotating the turret are some of the best in class, which means that you really don't have to worry about the gun ever blooming. I will say though, when rotating the turret on this tank, not rotating the tank itself, it does bloom quite a bit, so you do have to wait for it to aim back down, but as I said, that aiming time is so good, it's just an excellent tank for snapping any shots on the map. And what makes it the king of the hill is the excellent gun depression of 10 degrees it does get. As well, it actually has a very healthy 20 degrees of gun elevation, but that gun depression means that you can hide your really weak side armor, extremely weak lower plate, and you become pretty much impervious to any rounds coming at the front of the tank, with the upper plate being pretty much auto ricochets to all standard ammo, and heat rounds are not going to have enough pen to even think about getting through that upper plate. The turret as well is extremely thick. You're going to need at least 350 millimeters of premium pen to go through the turret. It does have the cupola on the top, but really it's still an extremely hard target to penetrate as long as you know what you're doing. You're wiggling your turret. It is a very, very hard tank to take out. As well, it's got very good mobility. 42 kilometers per hour top speed, 15 backwards, which actually makes it the fastest backwards in reverse speed, right off on par with the mouse. It's got very good effective power to weight ratio of 13.04. Its traverse speed is best in class, and as well the turret traverse speed is very, very quick. So with all these things going for it, it is just an excellent tank. And one thing a lot of people don't know about this is it actually has a 21.5% concealment ratio, making it the most effective tank at sort of not being spotted wherever it goes in the tier 10 heavy tank class. So it's just effective in every single category. It can brawl with the mediums, it can work the gun depression, it can bounce the shots, it can go against heavies, tank destroyers, anything, easily pen the shots. It's just such an excellent tank. And I forgot to put in, this tank also carries HESH shells. I think it's 120 millimeters of standard penetration with the HESH, and it's able to do 515 damage on any target it hits. So not only does it have a little bit of an increased damage for a 120 millimeter, it's also able to just tear apart the sides of medium tanks, even some of the lightly armored heavies, where you can't do that in a tank like the IS-4. So it is such a brutal tank. There is one major drawback on the Chieftain Mark VI, and that is it's a premium tank, and you have to buy it. You'd probably at least have to spend $50 to pick up this tank whenever it does hit the store, which is a really big drawback. I wanted to put this tank higher, but I just couldn't bring myself to put a premium tank higher up on the list when you could run a tank for free where you don't have to say, hey look, I bought a tank to do well in ratings. So that's why I put this tank in the number 4 spot. Moving on up to the number 3 spot is the T22 Medium, one of the most feared tanks on the battlefield, and there is a really good reason for that. Now the gun on this tank does have a very strong damage per minute of 3,506, but in my opinion that's not really the selling point because it just has awful gun handling statistics going for it. It's got really bad penetration at 240 on the standard pen, as well shell velocity of 1015, that's almost 500 less than a tank like the Object 140. As well, it's got the worst aiming time out of every tier 10 medium in the game at 2.08, and dispersion value at 0.308 again is not too good for a tier 10 medium when you've got tanks like the 62A, which are just laser eye accurate. As well, 6 degrees of gun depression is definitely not bad for a Russian medium tank, but it's still not a crazy amount. You're not going to be super flexible on pretty much any terrain you're stuck on. The dispersion values on this tank as well are not spectacular, so you might be thinking, what is the point of running this tank when I could run a 62A or a 140 and do 5,000 times better with the gun? Well, it is the armor profile on this tank. It has got to be thicker than some of the top tier heavy tanks you'd be fighting. That's because it is a complete triangle. A lot of newer players don't really know this that come in the tier 10 because it's such a rare tank. But the entire armor profile is just a big flat slant. It's literally just a triangle with a turret stuck on it. And because of that, it is so hard to penetrate. And when people think that the tank is over-angling its side, you'll see in this replay here, I'm going to purposely, I think when the 57 shoots at me, I'm going to purposely over-angle my tank in the side to make it look, of course, like I'm giving a weak spot on the side armor, but really it's spaced armor and then a big slant. So you're shooting at that, you're losing penetration through the spaced armor, and then it's going to hit that big slant and it's going to ricochet right off into the dirt. And that's what happens about 60-70% of the shots in this tank. In fact, a lot of people that don't know how to run it completely wrong because they'll hear, wow, this tank's got a ridiculously overpowered armor profile, I'm going to go run it out there. And then they get penned right through the front because the frontal armor on this tank is only about 230 millimeters thick, while the side armor is about 400 to 500 millimeters depending on how well you know how to angle it. But really, it is a crazy amount of thickness on the side, and if you know how to run this tank, it will definitely be one of your top performing mediums in the game. And that's why it is so strong out there. As well, it's actually got a very good power to weight ratio of 6, and with a top speed of 55 kilometers per hour, 20 reverse, it's also a very mobile tank. So that's one thing that is also very, very strong on it. It's got an amazing traverse speed of 60.75, which means that you can really easily wiggle the tank back and forth when people are trying to hit at you, if they're aiming at your front, stuff like that. It's just impossible to pen this tank. And one of the nastiest things I find about it is that not only can you not hit the side of it with any HE, but as well, if you're aiming at the rear of a 62A or a 140 in pretty much any tank, you can easily get high explosive range to the rear of them because they're only about 50 millimeters thick. This tank gets about 110 millimeters on the rear because it is a slant. So as well, this tank is pretty much impenetrable to any standard HE shells, unless of course you're running a tank like the Conqueror or the Chieftain. It's just a very, very tough tank to penetrate. But just like the Chieftain Mark VI, unfortunately it is a collector vehicle, which means that it is a pretty expensive tank at that. In fact, this is probably one of the most expensive tanks because everybody wants it. When it comes out, it's usually only in crates. My guess is about $200 you need to spend to pick up this tank guaranteed. So that is one big drawback for this vehicle, is that if you don't have it, there's no point to buy it. You're just wasting money to pick up a tank to do better in ratings. There's really no point to do that. So I would definitely suggest to stick with some of the non-pay-to-win vehicles in the game. Placing in the number 2 spot is the Fache 155. Now, when this tank's autoloading gun came into the tank, it was borderline overpowered. It was just a ridiculously overpowered tank you never wanted to fight on the battlefield. And while they did nerf the tank, in my opinion, it is still an overpowered vehicle. It has 3,301 damage per minute, with 280 millimeters of penetration. Pretty much anybody you're aiming at is going to be an easy pen, and it does 560 damage per shot. But the thing is that if you load premium, you're literally losing only 15 damage per shot at 545, which means that you could literally just shoot premium 370 millimeters of penetration at anybody you want willy-nilly, barely losing any damage per minute. As well, the tank has very, very good aiming time at 2.04 seconds. As I said before, the T22 Medium has a longer aiming time than the Fache 155. Now, dispersion at 0.328 is not spectacular on this tank, but it is an auto-loading tank, which you can be extremely aggressive in. It takes 7 seconds to shoot after the first shell, and that is not too bad at all, judging that 7 seconds for 560 damage, and then 13 seconds later, you're getting another whole shell. The Mowry, I think it has like a 10-second reload or 11-second reload. This is almost out-reloading a Mowry just on the clip itself. So it is a crazy amount of damage per minute this tank does get. Dispersion factors all on the move while rotating the gun after shot are spectacular on the vehicle, and the tank only has 5 degrees of gun depression, but honestly, it's a tank destroyer, so you really don't have to worry that much about gun depression in a type of vehicle like this. And as well, it's a very low down one at that, so the gun's very low to the ground as it is, so I honestly never noticed the gun being that big of a hassle trying to get the gun depression out. It has a very good gun traverse speed at 32.26. It weighs 57 tons, which is about the same as an E50M, and when this tank goes 50 kilometers per hour with a power-to-weight ratio of 20.83, it's able to pretty much just demolish anything in front of it. I've rammed Sheridans for 800 hit points at full speed in a tank like the Fache or the E50M. It is just ridiculous at ramming people, and when you ram somebody for 500, let's say, and then tap 2 shells into them, they've lost 2,000 hit points. That's literally more than an entire tier 10 hit point pool from some mediums and some tank destroyers. So that's what just makes this tank so broken on the battlefield, is that there's really nothing bad going for it. And if you thought the armor might be weak on it, it's about 310 millimeters on the entire upper plate. Now, of course, shell normalization will bring it down to about 280, but that's still a crazy amount of penetration. You're going to need pretty much premium ammo to 100% guarantee pen this tank. Even tank destroyers really struggle to pen it. It's sort of like the WZ-120 of tier 10. So it is a ridiculously hard tank to go up against. You can be really aggressive in it and really not suffer that much in return. I will say the only weakness on this tank, just like the Object 263, is shooting right through the front track wheel. Not only do you stop this tank dead in its tracks, it also 99% of the time damages the tank. So if you didn't know that, shoot this tank in the track wheel if it's more than about a 20-degree angle, and you're easily going to pen right through it. But overall, this is a ridiculously overpowered tank still, in my opinion. I pulled it out for one game today, and this is the game you're seeing. It's like 5,000 damage, so it's a ridiculously strong tank. And I would definitely suggest, if you haven't ground down this line, to definitely do it, because all the tanks in the line are spectacular. The Tier 7 is okay, but the Tier 8, the AMX AC46 is great. The Tier 9, the Fache, I'm not sure if I think it's just the Fache. It's a spectacular tank as well. Crazy armor profile, crazy damage per minute. The entire line is one of the best lines, and it's one of my favorite tank destroyers in the game. And in the number 1 spot, we have the mouse. Now, after the recent heavy tank hit point buffs, the mouse received a crazy amount of hit points, sitting at 3,000. And if you're running the hit point buff, which I definitely would suggest you do on this tank, it's going all the way up to 3,180. Now, just to give you an example of how many hit points that really is, if you had an Object 140, which has one of the highest damage per minutes in the game, non-stop spamming standard ammo, and let's say it pens every single shell on the mouse, which we know in a real-life scenario, if you're angling your mouse, you know what you're doing. That's never, ever going to happen. The mouse will survive for about 50 seconds. Now, if you're bouncing half of those shells, now that's literally a minute and a half. So you can see how hard it is to just take out a single mouse on the battlefield. And that's what makes it such a strong tank, and honestly, in my opinion, the best tank for ratings games, because if you can hold a line, you can literally hold an entire push just by your single tank. Now, of course, the damage per minute on this tank isn't spectacular at 2,500. The penetration isn't great at 246, although I will say I don't really mind the penetration because when you're aiming down on people, you're such a tall tank, you're just looking down on their hulls, which makes it a lot less effective on the armor profile. So 246 pen really isn't that bad, but it has a nice amount of damage at 460, which means that you do actually hit pretty hard. I think it's got around the same gun as like the Ferdinand at tier 8, but as well it's got meh gun handling statistics at 2.63. Dispersion 0.344 really isn't that good, but when rotating the turret it has excellent dispersion factors at 0.08, which is really, really good. That means that you can pretty much turn the turret on a dot, snap the enemy, it's not going to bloom at all. And that's something that is really important because when you're using this tank, of course you want to angle that turret so people aren't penning you. But as soon as they shoot, you can whip that turret out, snap the enemy, and go back to side scraping it. That's one thing that you really want to be able to do in this tank, and thankfully it does have a good aiming time. But a lot of people argue that the gun on this tank isn't great, and because of that, they'd rather run a tank where they can pen their shells, get damage out, than run a tank that's a lot slower and doesn't have a great accurate gun. But the thing is, when you're going 25 kilometers per hour and you've got this many hit points, you have all the time in the world to take your shots, pen the shots, hold the line, and that's what this tank is just really good at doing. Nobody wants to push on a mouse. As I said, it's going to take 50 seconds to kill a full health mouse, and if you're in any other tank in the game, unless you're an E100, and a mouse is pretty much going to be able to out damage per minute in E100, I'm pretty sure, or at least very, very closely fight it. If you're pushing on a mouse and it's got full hit points, you're probably going to lose. So a lot of people don't push on a mouse, which means that if a mouse is holding one spot on a heavy tank push, those heavy tanks aren't going to want to push on the vehicle. So the mouse is just excellent at holding a single line where you could hold 3 or even 4 tanks sometimes, and they just can't push on you because you've got one tank destroyer helping you, you've got other heavy tanks behind you. But the reason the mouse is such an effective tank isn't because of the gun, it isn't because of the gun depression, how quick it is, it's just because of the hit points and the armor profile it has. What you're able to do is not only, as I said, hold a line and maybe cause your team to flank behind and kill the enemy team, but you're also able to call when to push. If you're running a mouse and let's say you've got 3 heavy tanks behind you, and the enemy team's got 4 heavy tanks just lined up ready to shoot your team, so they're not pulling out, nobody's trading shots, and it's just a full stalemate. Now you see that your medium flank is being killed by the enemy team. So what do? Well, if you're in a mouse, you can literally just say, hey team, stay behind me, I'm going to completely Iron Fist right through the enemy team, take the shots for you, and then you guys can all rush right in on them. And that's one thing that is really nice to do in a mouse. Even sometimes you'll notice that you have way more heavy tanks than the enemy team, but your team still just doesn't want to push on the enemy team because obviously you don't want to get hit. So when you're in a mouse, you can make that call and think, hey, well, if I push, I don't care if I get hit, I've got 3,000 hit points. Even if I get hit by all the enemy tanks, I'll still have half my hit points left if they even pen all their shots. So the mouse is just such an effective tank on ratings, not because it's overpowered, but if you know how to run it and you're a smart player, you can make the right decisions and cause a victory when you might have completely lost it in any other tank. So that's why I really think the mouse is such a strong vehicle, is because you can change the course of the battle where you really couldn't in some other vehicles. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below if you haven't already. Like the video if you haven't. And if you do like this type of video and you want to see anything else like that, please let me know in the comments down below what video suggestions you have, because I literally record the videos after I come up with the idea an hour before. I don't pre-record my videos, and that's unfortunate for me because I never have enough time sometimes. I have to wedge them in there, but I always try to make sure I get quality content out for you guys. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Let me know what you guys think of your favorite tanks and the best ones for ratings in the comments down below. But other than that, guys, I'll see you in the next one. I hope you're all happy and healthy out there.